everyone, welcome back to our live naturalist chat. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a special treat for you because today we are in coastal Alabama and we want to show you some cool things that is down here in this part of Alabama. So as many of you know, we at the Alabama Nature Center are invested in teaching other people about conservation and the wise use of our natural resources. And one of the things that we like to highlight at the Alabama Nature Center is the great biodiversity that the state of Alabama has. And part of that biodiversity comes from the fact that we have so much fresh water. We have so many different geographical regions in Alabama, everywhere from the coastal beaches all the way up to mountains. And so all of that lends itself to a lot of biodiversity here in the state. So we're here down in South Alabama to show you some of this beautiful habitat. And so this is what we would call a scrub habitat. So when you get away from the beaches and you get away from the dunes, you enter a scrub habitat, and it'll eventually lead up into a maritime habitat, maritime forest habitat. And so it kind of blends together, those two habitats, and even into the dunes. You know, there's no hard lines of this habitat, but it can be characterized by a few different things. So it can be characterized by the scrub oaks, these little tiny oaks that are everywhere. You can see them behind us. We have some false rosemary here. And we have one of the bloomers that we really like here in the fall is the sandhill blazing star. We also have an abundance of different pine trees. And so this live oak, this is a sand live oak, so it's a totally different species than the live oaks that you're familiar with in other parts of the state, and it stays small and scrubby, and part of that and part of all of this habitat has to do with the soil. So you know, here we're beach sand soil, and we also have a lot of influence from salt that comes in from the ocean, and then we have other influence as far as winds, and so you'll see a lot of things are kind of pushed over and they're windswept, and so that really shapes the habitat here. So we want to talk to you about some of the animals that live in this habitat. And so over the past few weeks we've been talking a lot about turtles, and we're going to continue talking about turtles. So here, and one of the reasons that we have such amazing turtle diversity is because of those different geographical regions. And as many of you might know, we have a lot of different sea turtles that can be spotted off the coast of Alabama. So there's been 5 sea turtle species that have been spotted off the coast of Alabama. We have one, the loggerhead sea turtle, which actually nests here in abundance in coastal Alabama. And so that's really cool. If you come down to the beaches of Alabama, you can get to see some sea turtle action. You might even see some sea turtle nests that have been roped off. And so it's really important that if you're visiting coastal Alabama and the beaches, that you respect those sea turtle nests and do what you can to preserve the beach and not leave stuff piled up on the beach and fill in all the holes that you might dig and things like that, so it doesn't disrupt sea turtle nesting, because that happens here. Another really important animal that you can find here is our only species of tortoise. And so we're actually going to talk to you about gopher tortoises today. And you might remember that we did for National Gopher Tortoise Day, we showed you our resident gopher tortoises at the Alabama Nature Center, Big Mama and Lieutenant Longleaf. So you can go back and find that video. It's one of our first naturalist chats, and learn more about them. But here we're actually going to show you a wild gopher tortoise burrow, and we're going to tell you some tips about if you encounter a burrow, you want to respect its space quite a bit. We're going to tell you why, and we're going to tell you why this habitat is so important for conservation and why we need these wild places. So if we want to walk up here, and I'm going to be very careful to stay out of the way of this burrow. So this is a gopher tortoise burrow. It's an active burrow. I can see that there's been some digging going on around it. There's fresh tracks and things like that, but this burrow is small, so I think it's a rather small tortoise that lives here. And I can also see where the dirt is actually pushed away. I'm keeping my distance because you never want to walk around the gopher tortoise burrow, especially in the front apron area. And that's because this is where they would lay their eggs. So mating happens typically between May and July. Nesting can happen all the way through August and September, and so you could have babies just lying underneath the soil in this apron area. So that's where they leave their eggs. So it's very important to respect these areas and to not walk in this area where you could potentially crush the eggs. So they're actually determined, the sex of the young is determined by temperature. So females, if it's really warm, you'll get more females. If it's cooler, you'll get more males. All right, one of the other cool things about this is that gopher tortoises are highly social, and some studies lead us to believe that they could be one of the most socially complex animals of the turtle arena. So let's look over here, and you're gonna see this very cool gopher tortoise trail. And so this is where this particular gopher tortoise and many others, they use this trail all the time, and they're going to find food, but they're also visiting their neighbors. And so that's one of the cool things about gopher tortoises, is they typically live in aggregations that are called colonies, and they use these trails by which they can visit their neighbors. Now, something else that's kind of funny and interesting about gopher tortoises is that they will actually form social cliques. So they will form groups that like each other, and they will avoid other groups that they don't like. And they could all be in the same area. They could even be using the same trail, but some they just like some of their neighbors and not all of their neighbors. So that's something that is pretty interesting. So let's walk down this trail very carefully and let's see what we find further down. And this is very distinctively gopher tortoise trail. You see, it's almost like two tire tracks on the side and debris right in the middle. Other animals will use this too, and what's cool about gopher tortoises, as we all know, gopher tortoises are a keystone species because they have a large effect on the environment, because lots of different animals use their burrows. They've counted 350 different species that use gopher tortoise burrows. But also they change the environment. They change the environment with their digging, they change their environment with their trails. They eat so many different foods, and when they're eating those different foods and depositing waste along their trails, they're actually shaping the ecosystem even with plant life. So let's go up here. This is some beach rosemary, very characteristic of this scrub habitat. Small scrubby little plant, beach rosemary. We're going to walk through here, and this trail leads to another gopher tortoise burrow. And so this burrow, we're staying well away from it. We're not going to walk close to it, but you can see this is a much larger burrow. This apron area that goes all the way around it, we want to be very careful not to step on that apron area. We don't want to do any damage to the burrow itself. These are protected animals. They are protected in some places by the federal government, in some places just by the state government, but all protected nonetheless. And so even if we were to see a gopher tortoise out here, we wouldn't touch it, move it, mess with it, or do anything like that, nor do we want to disturb their burrows at all, because we want to protect this habitat, protect the burrows, and protect the animals themselves. It is rather interesting looking at these different trails. There's another trail that goes here. And so all of these are kind of linked together because there is a colony of gopher tortoises in this area. And so that's pretty cool. And let's see if we can find some of their food that they like. We saw some. Let's go back down the trail. All right, so we have some prickly pear cactus, which is just barely poking out of the ground. There's a lot of it scattered around here, but prickly pear cactus there's a lot of different species, They will like to grow in the sandy habitat as well, and this is something that the gopher tortoises will eat. They'll eat the pads of the cactus, they'll eat the fruits that come with it. They eat a lot of fruits and grasses and things like that, so they like this open area. They like this open canopy system. As you can see, we have lots of blue sky coming through, and that blue sky is giving the gopher tortoises the sunlight they need, and it's allowing all this herbaceous stuff to grow up so that they have things to eat on. So this is the kind of habitat they like. This habitat is usually maintained by fire, and fire is a very important part of their ability to survive in this area because it creates this perfect habitat. So habitat loss is a huge reason for their decline, as well as people doing things to their burrows. So we've got our little burrow here. We're gonna take one last look at it. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any questions. All right, so this is a really cool habitat. We're probably going to be talking about the different habitats in coastal Alabama, and we're going to continue our talk about different turtles of Alabama. You got to see our one and only tortoise species. We got to talk a little bit about sea turtles. Just remember all this amazing diversity that we have here in Alabama, and make sure that if you come and visit wild places like this, that you're very cautious and mindful about where you're walking and where you're putting your stuff, and make sure not to harass any wildlife that's out here. And we also want to make sure that no one's trying to take animals home with them. So when you go on vacation, you don't want to bring back some wildlife and either move it to another part of the state or try to keep it as a pet. So as I said before, these are protected species. If you would like to meet a gopher tortoise up close in person, you can come to the Alabama Nature Center, where we have our two ambassadors who are education animals. They reside there at the Alabama Nature Center, and you can get up close and personal with them, and you can watch them in their little false burrows, and you might even can pet them or watch them eat. And you can do all of that by just visiting the Nature Center and learn more about some of the reptiles and amphibians that call Alabama home. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and let us know. If you'd like to see anything in particular, any topics that you would like for us to talk about during the live Naturalist chats, just let us know. We want to hear from you. Hope you have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next week.